The great chamber of the Galactic Council shone with light from thousands of crystals, each hanging from the high ceiling like frozen stars. The council members, proud representatives of dozens of powerful alien civilizations, sat in their raised seats. They believed this hall was the center of power for the galaxy. Here, decisions were made, wars were ended, and peace was declared. Every empire present felt secure in its strength, and together they thought of themselves as unshakable. On this day, they waited for a younger race, humans, to arrive. Yet in their eyes, this meeting was not about respect or equality. It was about teaching the humans their place. The war between humanity and a council-protected client species had shaken the galaxy more than anyone expected. The council believed humans would fall quickly. Their fleets were smaller, their colonies fewer, and their technology newer compared to older races. But the humans had resisted fiercely. They fought with tactics that seemed reckless, but proved effective. Council generals studied the battles and found the same pattern repeated. Humans adapted faster than anyone thought possible. They won victories, even outnumbered. Still, instead of seeing this as strength, the council dismissed it as luck or desperation. Inside the chamber, many alien delegates spoke in hushed tones, their voices filled with amusement. A tall insectoid delegate clicked her mandibles together and said to her neighbor that humans were too emotional to rule themselves wisely. A scaled reptilian leader let out a hiss, saying humans lacked tradition and would collapse without guidance. Others joined in, sharing laughter and sharp remarks. To them, peace talks were only a chance to humiliate Earth, to force the humans to sign agreements that made them look weak. The council planned to demand land, resources, and tribute. They did not think of it as cruelty. They thought of it as order. For centuries, the council had forced younger races to obey through treaties disguised as peace. No one had ever dared to reject them. Why would humans be any different? Their ships still lacked the raw firepower of council dreadnoughts. Their colonies still depended on trade routes guarded by council fleets. The chamber filled with smug confidence as delegates imagined the humans bowing their heads. The head speaker of the council, a towering avian creature with feathers like silver knives, spread his wings and spoke proudly. He said the humans would soon be reminded of the balance of power. His voice carried across the hall, confident and calm. Many nodded in agreement. To them, peace was not about fairness, but control. This was the tradition of the galaxy, and no species had broken it before. The room buzzed with certainty. Even as news reports from the front lines described surprising human victories, the council brushed them aside. A few nervous voices asked if perhaps humans deserved more respect, but they were quickly silenced. The majority laughed at the idea. Primitive, one delegate called them. Children with guns, another added. The arrogance in the chamber was thick, wrapping around every conversation like smoke. Far above the chamber floor, banners of the council's oldest empires hung proudly. They reminded everyone of the age and strength of the ruling species. Compared to them, humanity's history looked short. The council took comfort in this difference, convincing themselves that a younger race could never challenge their dominance. Their confidence grew not from truth, but from habit, an old belief that age always meant superiority. The council's aides moved quietly along the walls, recording notes and preparing speeches. Some even prepared celebrations for after the talks, expecting victory without battle. The whole event was treated as theater, not as true negotiation. To them, it was already over. They imagined the human representatives bowing under pressure, signing documents, and returning home defeated. They saw this future so clearly that no other possibility entered their minds. Behind their confidence was also fear, though few admitted it aloud. The humans had shown spirit in war. They had made choices that did not follow the usual rules of strategy. Council commanders whispered of human captains who sacrificed their own ships to protect civilians, or soldiers who fought on even when supplies were gone. It disturbed the council because such behavior was unpredictable, and yet instead of respecting it, they turned their unease into arrogance. If they spoke loudly enough about human weakness, perhaps they would forget the strength they had witnessed. The chamber waited in shining stillness for the human delegation to arrive. The council members leaned back in their seats, their eyes glowing with superiority. Some rehearsed the insulting demands they would soon read aloud. Others sharpened their words like blades, ready to cut into human pride. None of them considered that the humans might not play the role they had written for them. The council believed the script was already finished. Every detail showed their confidence. Guards stood relaxed at the doors, certain there would be no trouble. The recording drones floated lazily above, ready to broadcast the submission of Earth to billions across the stars. Even the refreshments on the tables were prepared for a celebration, not a struggle. The council was so sure of itself that it could not imagine any outcome but victory. And so the great hall of the Galactic Council became a stage, its members actors in a play they thought they controlled. Their arrogance was shared, their laughter loud, their voices certain. Yet beneath the brilliance of the crystal lights, the fate of the galaxy hung unseen, waiting for the moment when humans would step through those doors and show the council that confidence built on arrogance can shatter with a single truth. The doors of the great chamber opened with a deep sound, and every eye turned to see the human delegation. Their entrance was not rushed, not nervous, but steady and controlled. At the front walked the human ambassador, a man with calm eyes and firm steps. Beside him moved his aides, each carrying files and devices, their faces serious. Behind them were officers in clean, sharp uniforms, the kind worn by those who had seen real battle but still carried themselves with pride. Their boots struck the polished floor in rhythm, echoing across the vast chamber. The aliens on the council seats leaned forward to watch. Some smirked, others whispered. They expected humans to look desperate or insecure, but what they saw instead was a group that did not bow or shrink. The humans did not decorate themselves with jewels or symbols of power like many alien delegates. Their strength was in their simplicity, straight lines, clean uniforms, and eyes that showed focus. A low voice rose from one side of the chamber. An alien with long horns chuckled and said to his neighbor that humans were to act like veterans, when in truth they were children among elders. The words were meant to humiliate, but the humans did not react. They walked on as if the laughter had not touched them. Their silence made some council members uncomfortable because it showed control, not weakness. The humans reached their place at the long table prepared for them. They sat down in a quiet, organized way. Each movement was deliberate, not hurried. The ambassador placed his papers carefully, then folded his hands. The officers stayed alert, their eyes scanning the hall, noting every detail. Even the aides carried themselves with discipline, as if they were part of the same chain of command. To the humans, this was not a performance. It was duty. From the high seats, the council members watched with mixed feelings. Some were annoyed. They had expected humans to arrive with excitement, nervous smiles, and eagerness to please. Instead, they saw something colder and steadier. It unsettled them because it did not match the picture they had painted. The humans looked like they belonged, even though the council wanted them to feel like outsiders. The speaker of the chamber, tall and covered in silver feathers, spread his wings and welcomed the delegation in a formal tone. His words were polite, but everyone could hear the pride hidden in them. "We are pleased that Earth has chosen to attend," he said. "It is rare for a young race to be given such honor." Many in the chamber clapped their claws or struck their tails on the ground in agreement. It was a greeting meant to sound respectful, but carried a sting. It reminded everyone that the humans were younger, smaller, and supposedly less important. The ambassador gave a small nod. His answer was short: "We came to listen." His voice was firm, not loud, but the tone carried across the chamber. It lacked the flowery words that most alien diplomats used. It was direct, almost military. Some in the audience frowned, whispering again. They thought it was too plain, too blunt. Yet there was a weight in that simplicity. One reptilian leader leaned forward, his tongue flicking. He hissed that human ships were small and fragile, that their weapons were outdated. He laughed, saying humans had only survived the war because the council had been distracted by greater matters. His laughter was echoed by others. Still, the humans did not rise or argue. Their calm expressions did not change. The ambassador's eyes remained steady, his hands unmoving. He simply looked back at the speaker, as though the insults were nothing but noise. That composure struck some of the younger races watching from the gallery. They whispered to each other that humans looked different from what they had imagined. Instead of fear, there was confidence. Instead of loudness, there was control. Some began to wonder if perhaps the stories from the war, the stories of impossible battles and unexpected victories, were true. The officers sitting behind the ambassador were not ordinary soldiers. They had fought in those battles. Their faces carried the weight of sleepless nights and hard choices. Yet in the chamber, they sat with discipline, their uniforms spotless, their posture unshaken. Even when they heard alien leaders laugh at their sacrifices, they did not flinch. The galaxy had not seen soldiers like this before, soldiers who carried both scars and pride without showing weakness. The council chamber felt different now. The humans had not spoken many words, yet their presence changed the air. Some aliens felt irritation, as if humans were refusing to play the role expected of them. Others felt a quiet unease. The human silence seemed louder than all the speeches given before. The silver-feathered speaker tried again to remind them of their place. He spoke of the council's history, of how countless races had come here to seek guidance, to be shaped into responsible members of the Galactic Order. His voice was proud, his words heavy with tradition. He expected the humans to nod in gratitude, but the ambassador only watched him with calm eyes, saying nothing. That unspoken refusal to bow or flatter shook the rhythm of the chamber. One insectoid delegate clicked her mandibles and shouted across the hall, asking if the humans were too proud to show respect. The ambassador finally turned his head, his expression still calm. "We came to talk," he said slowly, "not to beg." His words cut through the hall like a blade. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of recording drones above. That single answer revealed more about humanity than any report could. They were not here to kneel. They were not here to be schooled. They had come to watch, to listen, and to decide for themselves. The council had expected weakness, but what they saw was strength hidden in silence. And though no one admitted it aloud, some in the chamber began to feel that the humans were not children after all. They were something far more dangerous, equals who refused to play by the old rules. The moment the peace talks began, the council revealed what they truly wanted. The silver-feathered speaker raised his wings and announced the terms with a voice that echoed across the chamber. His tone was grand, as if he were offering a gift, but every word carried the weight of chains. He said the humans must surrender several border colonies to council control. He said Earth must pay tribute for 100 years, delivering raw materials, energy, and wealth to maintain galactic stability. He said humanity must cut down its fleet, dismantle orbital defenses, and accept inspectors from the council to make sure they obeyed. The hall responded with cheers and hisses of approval. Many alien leaders struck their claws against the desks, stamping their approval. Others laughed openly, pleased with how humiliating the terms were. To them, this was peace built on fear and submission. The human delegation did not move. The ambassador kept his face calm, but inside, his aides clenched their fists under the table. The officers behind him exchanged short glances, but stayed silent. They knew these demands were worse than expected. Even in their private talks before, they had feared harsh terms, but this went beyond harshness. It was not an agreement. It was slavery dressed as law. The speaker continued, speaking as though he were teaching children a lesson. He reminded the humans that the council had ruled for centuries, that no race had ever challenged their authority and prospered. He said this treaty would save Earth from destruction. He called it mercy. His words were full of pride, but they dripped with insult. One alien delegate, a massive reptilian with scales that shone under the crystal light, leaned forward and mocked humanity directly. He hissed that humans had shown bravery. Yes, but bravery was useless against history. He said courage did not feed fleets or protect colonies. He called them reckless children playing with fire. His words made other delegates laugh loudly, their voices echoing off the walls. The human ambassador listened in silence, his eyes unblinking. The officers sat like statues, their jaws tight but their discipline unbroken. Yet every word spoken from the council table was a knife meant to cut deeper. The demands grew worse as the list continued. Humanity was told to give up the right to build new colonies without permission. They were told to submit all new technology for council inspection. They were even ordered to limit how many ships could fly beyond their own solar system. The message was clear. The Council wanted to trap humanity inside its own walls, a race forever chained and watched. A recording drone zoomed in on the human faces, sending their reactions live across the galaxy. Billions of viewers in other systems watched with curiosity. Some races pitied the humans, knowing the Council had crushed many like this before. Others sneered, waiting to see the humans bow. A few younger races whispered in secret corners of their home screens, hoping humans might resist, for no one had ever resisted before. The insults did not end with rules and payments. A thin, insectoid delegate clicked her mandibles and said humans had dirt on their hands, that they carried war wherever they went. She accused them of barbarism, of lacking the wisdom of old civilizations. Another delegate shouted that humans were lucky to even be invited into the chamber at all. Their voices overlapped, becoming a chorus of arrogance, each alien trying to prove themselves greater by stepping on Earth. The chamber filled with noise, with claws tapping, wings flapping, tails striking. The alien leaders celebrated before the humans had even answered. In their minds, the matter was already finished. The humans would have to agree. Who would dare refuse the Council? No one ever had. The humiliation was part of the process. For the Council, it was tradition. But to the humans sitting at the table, every word was a wound. They remembered their soldiers who had died in the war, fighting against impossible odds. They remembered their fleets that had bled in battles where numbers were against them. They remembered the faces of civilians they had saved at great cost. And now those sacrifices were being spit on, dismissed as meaningless. The Council wanted to turn victory into shame. One of the human aides clenched his jaw so tightly that a muscle trembled in his cheek. An officer's fingers tapped the desk slowly, a rhythm of restrained anger. Still, none of them spoke out of turn. Their silence was not weakness. It was control. The ambassador knew every camera was watching. He would not give the Council the satisfaction of seeing humans lose their composure. The insults lasted longer than the list of demands. For nearly an hour, different Council members took turns standing, delivering speeches filled with contempt. Some claimed humans had stolen victories through luck, not skill. Others accused them of being a danger to galactic peace. One even suggested humans should send their brightest children to be educated by the Council, so Earth might learn civility. The laughter that followed was cruel and sharp, echoing high into the crystal ceiling. Still the humans sat, their faces calm but their eyes burning. To the Council, this calmness was mistaken for quiet submission. They thought Earth was simply waiting for the right moment to bow. They believed the humans had no choice. They believed history would repeat itself, as it had so many times before with other young races. The speaker finally ended the list, his feathers gleaming as he folded his wings. His voice was full of triumph as he asked the humans to confirm their agreement. "The galaxy watches," he said, his tone almost mocking. "Will Earth choose peace or foolish destruction?" The hall thundered with applause, claws pounding, voices cheering. They thought the matter closed. But at the human table, the ambassador slowly raised his eyes. He did not answer yet. He simply looked around the chamber, from face to face, taking in the laughter, the smirks, the arrogance. His silence stretched, making the hall grow quieter than expected. The officers behind him sat straighter, their jaws firm. Billions across the galaxy leaned closer to their screens, waiting. In that long silence, it became clear to anyone watching closely. The humans were not broken. They were only waiting for their moment. The Council thought it had won, but it had only pushed humanity to the edge of a choice no one had ever dared to make. The silence in the chamber grew heavy as the human ambassador rose from his seat. His movement was slow, calm, and deliberate, but it drew the eyes of every delegate. The silver-feathered speaker tilted his head, expecting a quick acceptance, maybe some polite words of gratitude. Instead, the ambassador placed both hands on the table and looked directly into the glowing eyes of the Council. His voice, when it came, was steady, sharp, and without hesitation. He began by recounting the war, not with flowery words, but with facts that no one could deny. He reminded the Council of the battle at Cygnus Gate, where a human fleet of 12 ships had faced 30 Council warships and still forced them to retreat. He told of the siege on the ice world of Tarvos, where human soldiers held the line for weeks without supplies, protecting thousands of civilians until evacuation ships arrived. He spoke of commanders who died with their crews rather than abandon their posts, of colonists who stood with rifles when the enemy came, refusing to kneel even when defeat seemed certain. The chamber shifted uneasily. Some aliens clicked their tongues or whispered angrily, but none interrupted. The ambassador's words cut through the air like blades. He reminded them that humanity had not come to the war by choice, but had been attacked, provoked, and pushed. "We fought because you left us no other path," he said, his voice deep and controlled, "and we won battles you never expected us to survive." The reptilian leader who had mocked humanity earlier let out a hiss of protest, saying these victories were accidents, nothing more. But the ambassador turned his gaze to him, eyes hard. "If accidents can topple fleets 3 times our size," he said coldly, "then perhaps you should fear how deliberate we can be." The words struck the hall like thunder. For the first time, many delegates looked unsettled. The ambassador did not shout. He did not wave his arms. His calmness made his words even more powerful. He told the council that humans had come here in good faith, ready to talk about peace, ready to listen, ready to build something new. But what they had been offered was not peace. It was humiliation. "You speak of mercy," he said, his tone sharp, "but your terms are nothing more than chains. You do not want peace with us. You want our surrender dressed as agreement." The insectoid delegate who had earlier accused humans of barbarism clattered her mandibles in anger, calling the ambassador disrespectful. But again, he did not waver. He raised his voice slightly now, enough for every word to be heard clearly through the recording drones broadcasting across the stars. "We will not be your servants," he declared. "We will not pay tribute for surviving. We will not cut the strength that keeps our children safe, and we will never accept chains." The hall erupted in noise. Some shouted, some hissed, some pounded their desks in protest. But others fell into silence, shocked by the boldness of the human's words. The ambassador let the noise continue for a moment, then spoke again, his voice rising over the chaos. "You call us reckless, but we call it courage. You call us primitive, but we call it will. You call us weak, but we have faced your strongest, and we are still standing. You think this chamber decides our future? No. Humanity decides its own." The words hit the council like a strike. For centuries, no young race had ever dared speak to them this way. Most bowed, most begged, most surrendered under the weight of tradition. But here was a human, a representative of Earth, standing tall in the grandest hall of the galaxy, refusing to bend. It was not just defiance, it was a declaration. One of the elder delegates tried to cut him off, shouting that Earth would be crushed if it refused the council's terms. The ambassador turned toward him, his expression hard but calm. "You tried to crush us already," he said, "and still we are here." The simple truth of those words silenced even the loudest protest. The officers behind the ambassador sat straighter, pride flashing in their eyes. They knew the risks of what was being said, but they also knew this moment was bigger than all of them. Billions were watching the broadcast. Every word spoken here would echo across the stars. The ambassador was not only speaking to the council, he was speaking to every race that had ever been forced to bow. The council smirked and whispered among themselves, but the arrogance had begun to crack. Some were angry, others confused, and a few even looked worried. They had expected the humans to break under pressure, but instead the humans were rising higher. The balance of power in the chamber shifted, invisible but undeniable. The ambassador finished his words with a final statement. "We came here seeking peace, but peace cannot be built on humiliation. If this is what you call peace, then you do not understand us at all. Humanity does not kneel, not to you, not to anyone." The hall fell into chaos again, but this time the noise was different. It was not only laughter and insults. There were also murmurs of shock, of doubt, of fear. The humans had spoken plainly, refusing to play the role the council had written for them, and in that single moment, the course of history began to change. The human ambassador's words still echoed in the vast chamber when he calmly gathered his papers. The officers and aides rose with him, their movements sharp and disciplined. For a few heartbeats, the entire council froze, unsure of what was happening. No one had ever walked out on the council before. Delegates from powerful empires had shouted, protested, even begged, but none had stood, turned their back, and walked away. The silver-feathered speaker flared his wings, his voice sharp as he demanded the humans sit back down. His words carried authority, but there was a tremor beneath them. He had not expected this. He had thought his list of terms would crush human pride, not fuel their resolve. The ambassador didn't look at him. He simply said, in a tone that was neither loud nor soft, "Peace is not slavery." Then he stepped away from the table. The sound of human boots striking the polished floor filled the hall. Their steady rhythm was louder than the shouts that erupted from the council seats. The reptilian delegate slammed his claws against the desk, hissing that humanity would pay for this disrespect. The insectoid clattered her mandibles, screeching that the humans were sealing their own doom. Others jeered, calling them fools, calling them reckless, calling them arrogant. But the humans did not stop. Recording drones spun quickly above, capturing every second. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers watched in stunned silence as the humans, unbowed, left the chamber. Some races watching gasped, others cheered quietly in their homes, and some simply stared in disbelief. The council had ruled for centuries without challenge. Now, live before every eye in the galaxy, a younger race had done the unthinkable. The council chamber descended into chaos. Some delegates shouted for the guards to stop the humans, but none of the guards moved. They stood frozen, caught between orders and the weight of history unfolding. Others demanded immediate sanctions, calling for Earth to be isolated and punished. A few, however, sat in silence, their eyes sharp with thought. They understood what had just happened. The humans had not lost today. They had claimed something more powerful than territory. They had claimed dignity. As the humans neared the great doors, the ambassador paused only once. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping across the shouting chamber. "You may laugh now," he said in a calm, steady tone, "but history will not laugh with you." Then he and his delegation stepped through the doors, leaving the chamber behind. The heavy doors closed with a sound that seemed to echo like a final judgment. For a long moment after, the chamber was filled with shouting, clashing voices of outrage and disbelief. The silver-feathered speaker tried to restore order, his voice rising, but the chaos was too strong. Some delegates demanded Earth's destruction, others demanded the humans be ignored. But beneath the noise, there was fear. The walkout was more than an insult. It was a challenge. It was a declaration that the Council's authority was not absolute. News spread at light speed across the galaxy. The broadcast of the walkout was replayed millions of times. In colonies ruled harshly by the Council, whispers began. The humans dared, people said. If they can stand up to the Council, maybe we can too. In hidden corners of the galaxy, oppressed races shared the clip again and again. For them, the sound of human boots leaving the chamber was not defiance alone. It was hope. Inside the Council chamber, however, fear mixed with pride. The elder delegates mocked the humans even more loudly now, trying to cover their unease. They said Earth would regret this. They said the humans would crawl back, begging for forgiveness. Yet none could deny the sharp shift that had just taken place. For centuries, the Council's word had been law, but now, in a single moment, one race had shown that the Council could be defied. The human officers walking through the halls outside kept their faces forward, but inside their hearts pounded. They knew what this meant. Walking out was not just a gesture. It was a risk. It might mean more war. It might mean isolation. But it also meant freedom. They had chosen pride over submission, courage over compromise. The ambassador, though silent now, carried himself as if a great weight had been lifted. He knew their action would echo louder than any speech. A race that refused to kneel was dangerous because it inspired others. The Council might send threats, might spread propaganda, might try to punish Earth, but the galaxy had already seen the truth. Humans would not break. Even as the delegation left the Council building and returned to their ships, the recordings spread like wildfire. Commentators on distant worlds debated the meaning. Some called the humans reckless, others called them fools, but many, far more than the Council expected, called them brave. Back in the chamber, the silver-feathered speaker finally restored a measure of silence. His wings folded tightly, his eyes hard, he declared that humanity would regret this day. But his voice, once full of pride, carried a note of uncertainty. For deep inside, he understood what many others feared. A new chapter in galactic history had begun, and it was written not by the Council, but by humans who had walked away. The walkout ended the illusion of Council control. In one act, without a single weapon fired, humanity had declared itself free. The Council could rage, could threaten, could plan retaliation, but the sound of those footsteps echoing in the chamber would haunt them long after. At first, the Council laughed. They told themselves that the humans were reckless children who had just destroyed their own future. Delegates shouted across the chamber that Earth would come crawling back within weeks. They predicted panic in human colonies, riots in cities, and leaders begging for forgiveness. Their laughter was loud, but it was forced, carrying a sharp edge of fear they refused to admit. Then, the reports began. The first came only days after the walkout. A mining colony on the edge of Council space sent a message that it would no longer pay tribute to the Council. Instead, it signed a trade agreement with Earth. Council members dismissed it as a small act of rebellion, but soon there were more. Colonies that had long suffered under heavy taxes or unfair rules saw the humans as something new. They saw a race that had dared to walk away from the Council and survive, and they wanted to follow. Trade ships began redirecting their routes. Merchants from independent stations sought out human ports. For the first time in memory, commerce flowed away from the Council's control and toward Earth. Human markets, once small compared to the vast networks of older empires, grew rapidly. Resources poured in, and alliances formed quietly in back rooms and encrypted channels. The Council tried to stop it. They sent warnings to the colonies, reminding them of their duty. They threatened sanctions on traders who dealt with humans. But the threats were weaker than before. The image of the humans walking out of the chamber had spread too far, too fast. It was replayed on screens across the galaxy, studied in schools, whispered about in taverns. The humans were no longer seen as reckless upstarts. They were seen as defiant survivors. The first major shock came from within the Council itself. A mid-level member, representing a smaller empire, announced publicly that his people would not condemn the humans. He said the Council's terms had been unfair and that humanity had been right to refuse. His words caused outrage, but they also revealed cracks inside the mighty Council. If one dared to question, others might too. Soon, messages poured into Earth from unexpected places. A group of starfarers who had long been forced into dangerous Council labor routes asked for human protection. A clan of merchants offered technology in exchange for trade rights. Even some soldiers from minor species deserted their posts and swore loyalty to humanity, saying they would rather serve those who fought with honor than those who ruled with arrogance. Inside the Council chamber, panic spread like fire hidden under the floor. The silver-feathered speaker pounded his staff, demanding that unity be restored, but he could not silence the truth. The balance of power was shifting. The more the Council tried to dismiss the humans, the more powerful they appeared. In news networks across the stars, debates raged. Were humans dangerous? Were they heroes? Were they fools? The opinions differed, but one thing was certain: no one could ignore them anymore. Before, Earth had been a small voice, easily silenced. Now every action it took was amplified 1,000 times. Humanity had become the center of attention. Some Council generals warned that if Earth continued to rise, war might be the only answer. They drew up plans for strikes against human fleets, but even in secret meetings, fear showed on their faces. The last war had been costly. If they fought again and lost, their power would shatter completely. Worse, if they fought and won, other colonies might still rebel, inspired by human courage. The Council was trapped in a dilemma they had never faced before. The humans, meanwhile, continued their quiet work. They did not rush into open alliances. They did not boast loudly. Instead, they strengthened their fleets, trained their soldiers, and built new trade networks. Their calmness made the Council even more uneasy. The humans had not only walked out, they had walked away with a plan. Behind closed doors, some Council members admitted the truth. They had underestimated humans. They had thought Earth was just another young race, easy to bend and break. But humans had something different: an ability to adapt quickly, to fight against impossible odds, to survive where others would fall. Their stubbornness, once mocked, now looked like a weapon sharper than any blade. The silver-feathered speaker tried to rally the chamber, declaring that the humans would soon collapse under their own pride. But even as he spoke, new reports arrived. Another colony had refused tribute. Another group of traitors had shifted allegiance. And more importantly, whispers spread of entire systems secretly asking Earth for guidance. The chamber filled with unease. The arrogance that had once been thick in the air was thinning, replaced by doubt. Some delegates avoided eye contact, afraid to admit their fear. Others shouted louder than ever, desperate to cover their growing uncertainty. The council, once united in its superiority, was fracturing, and still the humans said nothing more. Their silence after the walkout was almost louder than their words had been. Every day that Earth did not return, did not beg, did not bend, the council's power weakened. It became clear that the blunder was not humanity's, it was the council's. They had pushed too hard, and now they were losing control of the galaxy they had ruled for centuries. The council had wanted to make humans bow. Instead, they'd made them rise higher than anyone expected. For the first time in generations, the Galactic Council admitted to itself that it had miscalculated. The proud delegates who once mocked Earth now sat in uneasy silence during their private meetings. Reports stacked higher every day, each one worse than the last. Human fleets were not shrinking, they were growing. Colonies that once obeyed the Council out of fear were now sending envoys to Earth asking for friendship and trade. Even soldiers from minor species whispered that they would rather fight beside humans than for the Council. The silver-feathered speaker tried to hold the chamber together with speeches. He reminded everyone of the Council's long history, of the centuries of power they had commanded. But his voice, once feared, no longer carried the same weight. Too many eyes had seen the broadcast of the walkout. Too many had heard the human ambassador declare that peace built on humiliation was no peace at all. Those words repeated across the galaxy like an unshakable truth. The Council began to realize that their arrogance had backfired. They had wanted to make an example of humanity, to humiliate them so completely that no other race would ever dare resist again. Instead, they had made humanity into a symbol of courage. Colonies that once grumbled in silence now spoke openly. Minor empires that had always obeyed out of tradition began to question why they should continue. Even among the Council's own member races, quiet doubts spread. A reptilian general, one of the fiercest critics of Earth, slammed his claws on the desk during one tense meeting. "We should have destroyed them when we had the chance," he hissed. But another delegate answered softly, "And if we had tried again, what if we lost again? What then?" That question silenced the room. Everyone remembered how close the last war had been, how human fleets had slipped through blockades, how human soldiers had turned impossible battles into victories. The truth was bitter. Humanity had survived where others would not, and if war returned, they might do more than survive. The insectoid delegate, once so loud in her insults, now clicked her mandibles nervously. She admitted that traitors from her worlds were secretly dealing with Earth. "If we punish them," she said, "our own markets will collapse. Already, goods from Earth sell faster than our own." The chamber stirred with unease. What began as a military problem had become an economic one. The humans were not only resisting, they were thriving. Slowly, the Council's pride turned into something it had not felt in centuries: fear. The thought that a young race, a species so recently dismissed as primitive, could rise so quickly shook the very foundations of their belief in their own superiority. The galaxy was no longer watching the Council. It was watching Earth. Behind closed doors, the silver-feathered speaker admitted to his closest advisors that the Council had made a blunder. He used that word, one that no one in the chamber had dared to say aloud before. "We thought them children," he said, his wings drooping slightly, "but we forgot that children grow." His words spread quietly through the chamber, repeated in whispers from delegate to delegate, until all knew the truth, even if none dared say it openly. Meanwhile, humanity did not boast or demand apologies. Their silence was more powerful than speeches. They continued to build, to forge alliances, to strengthen themselves. They did not seek to destroy the Council. They did not seek to conquer. They simply showed that they could stand on their own. That quiet defiance was more dangerous to the Council than any fleet. It proved that their grip on the galaxy was not unbreakable. Across the stars, younger races who had once been too afraid to resist began to test the limits. A mining colony refused to send tribute. A frontier world declared independence. Small acts, but they spread like sparks in dry grass, and every spark traced back to the moment humans walked out of the chamber. The council debated endlessly, their voices sharp, their tempers short. Some wanted to crush Earth with force, others wanted to lure them back with softer words. But deep down, all knew the same truth. The moment was gone. The humans had stepped beyond their control. One night, as the chamber sat in half darkness, the silver-feathered speaker looked across the empty hall. He remembered how confident they had been, how certain. Now, the echoes of human boots seemed louder than all the speeches ever given in that place. He whispered to himself, "We underestimated them, and now the galaxy sees us for what we are." The council, once proud and untouchable, found itself admitting the one thing it thought impossible. They had been wrong. They had created their own undoing, and all because they had mistaken defiance for weakness and courage for recklessness. For the first time in its long rule, the Galactic Council bowed, not to Earth directly, not with ceremony, but in their own hearts. They bowed to the truth they could no longer deny. They had made a blunder so great, it would change the course of history forever. The galaxy changed faster than anyone expected. Where once the Council's words had been treated as unshakable law, now every race spoke of the humans. Traders carried more than goods. They carried stories. They told of how the humans walked out of the council chamber without fear, how they faced insults and demands, yet refused to kneel. Every retelling made the humans larger than life, and soon they were no longer just a people. They were a symbol. At first, the council tried to repair the damage. They issued statements claiming Earth had misunderstood, that the terms of the treaty were meant for guidance and protection. But those words rang hollow. Too many had seen the broadcast of the walkout. Too many had watched the ambassador's calm defiance. Lies could not erase what billions had already witnessed. The more the council tried to rewrite the story, the more foolish they looked. Meanwhile, humanity acted with quiet strength. They did not flood the stars with propaganda. They did not boast or shout about victory. Instead, they worked. Shipyards on Earth's moons lit up with new production. Soldiers trained harder than ever. Diplomats moved quietly, meeting with envoys from small colonies and independent worlds. Agreements were signed in private, but their effects became clear in public. Trade routes, once dominated by council oversight, now pulsed with human ships. Goods that had once flowed only through council stations now reached markets through Earth. Other races noticed. An agricultural world long exploited for food supplies sent an envoy to Earth asking for fairer trade. A group of nomadic starfarers offered maps of hidden routes in exchange for protection. Even one of the council's own member species began secret talks with human diplomats. These were not grand alliances announced with fanfare. They were the quiet building blocks of something far greater. In homes across the galaxy, families watched recordings of the walkout again and again. Children of oppressed races asked their parents why their own leaders never spoke with such courage. Workers in mines and factories whispered that if humans could stand against the council, maybe they too could resist. Hope, a word that had been rare, began to spread, and with hope came change. The council felt the shift like cracks spreading through stone. Their meetings grew longer, their debates sharper. Some wanted to punish Earth with force, others demanded appeasement, and still others urged silence. But no matter what path they argued, none could deny the truth. Earth no longer needed them. In fact, the council needed Earth more than Earth needed the council. The greatest humiliation came when several colonies announced that they would only sign new trade deals if Earth approved. For centuries, the council had been the final word in all matters. Now their own subjects were looking to humanity for permission. It was a reversal so sharp that even the proudest delegates sat in silence when the news was read aloud. The silver-feathered speaker, once the loudest voice against Earth, finally admitted in a closed session that the council had made a blunder. His wings drooped, and his voice lacked its former pride. "We thought ourselves the masters of peace," he said, "but we have revealed ourselves as tyrants, and now they," he did not need to name the humans, "hold the trust we have lost." His words spread quickly, whispered from delegate to delegate, until they reached even those who still denied the truth. For humanity, the transformation was quiet but profound. No longer were they a young race begging for a place at the table. They had become the table itself, where others now came to seek answers. Their fleets still could not match the largest empires in numbers, but numbers no longer mattered. What mattered was that others believed in them. Belief could not be commanded by laws or forced by armies. Belief was earned, and Earth had earned it with courage. The ambassador who had led the walkout returned home to a hero's welcome, but he did not stand on balconies or parade through streets. Instead, he sat with his people and reminded them that what had been done was only the beginning. They will test us again, he warned. They will push and they will threaten. But if we remain true to ourselves, no chain will ever hold us. His words were broadcast not only on Earth, but across allied colonies, and his calm certainty gave strength to many who had never known it before. The Council sent another invitation months later, desperate to save face. This time, the terms were different, softer, almost pleading. They asked Earth to return and promised equality, but humanity did not rush to accept. They waited, letting the silence speak louder than demands. When they finally answered, it was not with humility, but with strength. "We will discuss peace," the new message said, "but only as equals, never again as servants." The galaxy listened, and the Council had no choice but to accept. Their arrogance had shattered, and their power no longer stood unchallenged. From that day forward, every race in the galaxy knew that the Council could be wrong. And more importantly, they knew that a younger race, once mocked and underestimated, had shown what courage could do. Humanity had not conquered the Council with weapons. They had conquered them with dignity, with defiance, with the refusal to kneel. The galaxy would never be the same again. And in the quiet corridors of power, even those who still hated Earth admitted the truth in whispers. The humans had walked out with nothing and returned as leaders.